All right, well, my name is Jennifer Adams, and I was born in Cranbrook, BC. I've lived in a lot of different cities. I moved from Cranbrook to Summerland, and I've lived in Vernon and Nanaimo and Kelowna, Vancouver and Cranbrook. My background is mostly entrepreneurial. I've had a number of different businesses, and I'm a mom to 4 beautiful girls. Well, I've done a lot of volunteering in the political arena, and through the years I've met a lot of really amazing women that have inspired me to not just get involved, but to step out and take on the roles of leadership. I think that it's important to have gender parity in either a business or in politics. It's definitely not the easiest place to be, but it's one of the reasons that I decided to run. Also, the Daily News building was sort of one of the triggers. Having that building sit empty and then having a motion go forward for us to let it sit for a year without even being able to talk to it really frustrated me, because I saw the potential for that building to do so many different things. You know, it might not be the prettiest building, it might not be the newest building, but for a city to invest so much money and then let it sit empty for years and then turn it into a parking lot was really frustrating for me. So it was one of the reasons that I decided to step forward. Seeing the overdose crisis and the things that are affecting our city in that arena is something else that I was really compelled to step forward and have a little bit of a voice for that. We've had some really good movement in that area, but without council sort of having some experience or having some kind of comfort about talking about some of these more uncomfortable things, I think those are important things to be able to address on council. And some of my background, I've done a lot of outreach, street outreach in Vancouver. I lived in Vancouver in the early mid-90s, and so a lot of the work that I did in Vancouver at the time was outreach in the early days of the needle exchange and different things like that, working with at the time, the heroin overdose crisis and the HIV crisis. So some of the experience that I've gained over the years is very relevant to today, so it's one of the other things that sort of compelled me to run. The top priorities, I've sort of looked at the Sustainable Development Goals that the United Nations has put forward, and if you look at those goals, they're a set. They're not a menu. So they have 17 goals that were put forward that all of the countries signed on. So if we look at those, the things that I'm passionate about and the things that I see are needed to be done in the city are very much in line with those Sustainable Development Goals. So things like ending poverty, ending homelessness, working on food policy, those are sort of my top 3 priorities. But working on the homelessness piece is really important. I believe in a housing first principle. As students, you're probably all very aware of the costs of housing and how the accessibility of housing is really needs to be looked at. We can't attract people to the area if they can't find a place to live. And then we have an ever increasing number of homeless that really needs solid action plans where we just need to try things. And the housing first principle that was put forward in Medicine Hat is one that is quite positive, and they can actually say as a city that they have solved the homelessness problem in Medicine Hat by the things that they went forward and do, which is investing in real estate and looking at a little bit outside of the box housing development plans, working with different community members, property investors, as well as the city actually purchasing and investing in housing. So we already invest in real estate. We spent $5 million on the Daily News building. If those types of investments were focused more on housing and working with the communities to increase the housing stock, I think it's a really important issue for Kamloops. Well, we have our university, which obviously brings a lot of people into our community, but I'll go right back to the housing situation. We have youth that move here, they want to come to university, but they have a really difficult time finding housing and affordable housing. I know groups of young people that were sharing, a suite with, 7 and 8 students just trying to make it go. So I think it's great to have the university, it's great to have those things to attract people, but without the housing, and then without the long-term jobs to keep them and retain them, that's important. So it's great that we have the university, but we have to make sure that we're also creating the economic diversity to funnel those young people through to keep them and retain them here. I have 4 daughters and I would love for them to stay in Kamloops. And one of the things that really interested me is one of our counselors voted on something that is quite controversial in the community, and her reasons, I believe her number one reasons were that she has lost people in her family to other communities, and if we had better job retention, if we had different opportunities for young people to stay, better paying jobs, a lot of those people would stay. And likewise, we want to be able to keep our young people here. So the housing is a big thing, transportation is a big thing. Our bus service is great, but I think we need to increase in some of the areas that we service. So the North Shore, the Reserve, looking at trying to get that happening for people over there, and then increasing the accessibility to the university routes too. It's really important, I think. Oh, definitely music in the park. When I didn't know anybody when I first moved to Kamloops. I'd never really spent any time here. I came up about a week prior to bringing my kids, kind of scoped out the city, and I was swimming in the river. I was like, oh, this is nice, Riverside. And all of a sudden I hear boop, boop, check, check. I was like, oh, what's this? So I discovered that Kamloops has a free live music concert every single night of the summer, and it is actually the reason that I moved here. So it's something that I share with everybody. I think it's a great thing that we have so much arts, music, and culture in Kamloops, and it's free. Music is something that brings everybody together, and in today's age where everybody's kind of plugged into their own, phones and that, I think it's really important that community come together. We have a mix of young people and old people. It'd be nice to see more of the university kids come out to music in the park and some of the youth, but we get a really good mix of people that come, and every single night the community comes together and moves to the music, and it's a really, I think it's the only city in Canada that's actually got free live concert every single night, so I think it's our crown jewel. Like I mentioned, servicing the North Shore and the Reserve, our Kamloops Reserve, it's a real struggle for people that live over there, not just young people, but people that are working as well as our elders. They don't have access to city transit in that part of the city, and I think that it's important for City Council to reach into the community there and try to find the solutions to create those transportation networks in the areas of the city where they're really lacking. One of the other areas I think that could use some improvements is West Side, also Valley View and Dallas. The bus routes out there are quite limited, so expanding the bus route, investing in that transportation is really important, particularly for students. A lot of students don't drive. A lot of people, we want to move away from a car-centric city, which is another piece that frustrates me, that we're building a parking lot, because I believe that Kamloops needs to focus on the walking, other modes of transportation. And I think our air quality over the last week or two has been something that has kind of made it really a live issue, which to date we haven't really had poor air quality to deal with to the extent that we have in other cities, but it's something that is definitely making us more aware of the importance of reducing emissions and creating, alternatives for people to get around other than just their cars. So. Well, the housing affordability, as the city grows, it's always a number one priority. So increasing affordability, increasing our housing stock. The city has invested in properties and they haven't really done any builds, any affordable housing builds for a long time. So I think that's probably one of the number one priorities for our city. Also, I believe that we need to look at economic diversification, getting away from resource-driven businesses. We should be, I believe, looking at things like solar power. We should be looking at economic diversification, increasing and continuing to do things in tech. If we look at the streams of education that we have in Kamloops, pairing up the programs that we're putting people through here up at the university to make sure that we're developing businesses to retain them is also really important, I think. So. Well, I think continuing to build a very diverse and friendly city. Also, again, the opportunity to create a city where there is no homelessness. The Sustainable Development Goals should be a lens that our city planners, our city staff, our city council, and the community should be looking through. And those are things like ending poverty, ending homelessness. Food policy, I believe, is a very important piece for Kamloops. Protectionism is something that's a lot more real than it ever has been. And if you think about some old stories, the cities that overcame great diversity were the ones that were prepared. So whether that be, increasing food stocks for emergency situations, the fire crisis has made a lot of things a little more present for us. We think about what if the trucks can't get in? What if we can't, import, or it gets too expensive to start importing food? Kamloops is a very good agricultural city, and I think we need to do more to invest in agriculture and really look at that food policy piece. So affordability and, ending poverty and ending hunger are the two top priorities for the Sustainable Development Goals. And if we, like I say, use those Sustainable Development Goals as a lens to guide us, I think that's really important. And I don't hear enough about the Sustainable Development Goals from either candidates or council. And I think it's a really, really important piece for not now, but also for the future. Oh, that's easy, my kids. My kids have, they're all very amazing. We've had some difficult circumstances to go through. We've struggled from time to time, and they're amazing, amazing and strong, and I've raised them to be very opinionated and independent, which is kind of a challenge sometimes, but I would definitely say number one, my greatest achievement would be my family.